From the House of the Temple on spooky 16th Street in Washington, D.C., this is the Tyler's Place Podcast, a podcast by Freemasons, for Freemasons, brought to you by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. I'm Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH, your host. Thanks for joining us. When you're done with this episode, make sure you check out some of our other great Scottish Rite content. We've got the Scottish Rite Journal podcast. You can listen to that right here wherever you're listening to the Tyler's Place podcast. It's a weekly show that brings the pages of the Scottish Rite Journal right to your speakers. Also, check out our YouTube channel and our TikTok page. There's great Scottish Rite video content there for you to check out. And speaking of great, we've got a great episode here for October 2022, a little Halloween theme, if you will. First, we're going to chat about some of the haunted happenings at the House of the Temple itself, talk to staff members, some family members even, and some spooky audio to share with you that you won't believe. Then, two brothers from Texas who are paranormal investigators are going to join us to talk about the ghostly encounters at their lodge. But first, the House of the Temple, 16th Street in Washington, D.C., as I said. It's about a mile north of the White House. So if you walk out the back door of the White House, across the park right past the statue of past Grand Master Jackson in full form there, and you go up 1 mile. On the right-hand side, you're going to come to the House of the Temple. It's an incredible building built between 1911 and 1915, and it's just this amazing Masonic facility, and it's our headquarters for the Scottish Rite Supreme Council, Southern Jurisdiction of the U.S., Mother Supreme Council of the world. But like any big old building, there are some creepy dark corners. There are definitely things that go bump in the night inside the temple. And I guess it bears mentioning that there are the mortal remains of two of our past Grand Commanders interred within the walls of the House of the Temple. Albert Pike, who was the guy who really shaped the Scottish Rite into what it is today. He wrote Morals and Dogma and really pulled our degrees together in a form that we would recognize today. And John Henry Coles, who lived at the temple for many years, and in fact he died at the temple, and he's still there today for his eternal rest, interred just a few feet from past Grand Commander Albert Pike. Now, for a long time, staffers have reported things like footsteps, the smell of pipe tobacco, shadows that move when they shouldn't, all the creepy things you'd expect at a building that has some, let's say, paranormal activity. But joining us now to talk a little bit about some of those creepy reports from the temple is Grand Archivist Arturo de Hoyos. Brother Art, a historian dedicated to facts, and, you know, in another life, I was a pseudo-journalist, I guess. So I want to, for our conversation, avoid the word paranormal if we can, and just talk about the facts as things we can't explain and leave them as things that we can't explain rather than say, this is haunted, this is not haunted. I don't think we can definitively say that. So I want to start at the very, very beginning with the building of the temple. Were there any reports of strange happenings or of workers being killed?
I don't think that I've heard of anybody being killed. I'm sure you're aware that that's considered to be somewhat fortuitous for the building site itself. If I can digress here, please. Something, since this is, Freemasonry.
And we just passed a couple of days ago the anniversary of the cornerstone laying.
That's right. In fact, with cornerstone layings, it was a common practice, to place coins under a cornerstone. And people have often said that they thought that that was for good luck or something like that. That's actually not what it was. Is that there are collections of old builders' rites and ceremonies. And they consist of like bearing coins or bearing a piece of string or something like this. And it goes back to kind of dark legends, is that the king's image was impressed on the coin. And the notion is that if you buried that coin under there, that you would trap the spirit of the person whose image was on that coin as kind of a foundation sacrifice or a way of protecting the building. And the same thing with the string, is it would be used to measure the person's shadow length secretly, and to attach them to it also. We know that in primitive times is that there were actual foundation sacrifices and that person would be buried underneath there. So there's kind of a tradition that if a person died as part of a building project, that building would be blessed in a way by having the protection of that spirit.
It's so strange that you mentioned that. I just read that in an old short talk bulletin about the Northeast Corner.
Oh.
About that exact tradition of they would bury a body or bury a living person underneath of the cornerstone as a sort of a sacrifice to for the fortunes of the building. So, but in our context, certainly no one was buried under the cornerstone of the house of the temple.
No.
So conspiracy nuts get lost. And we don't know of any reports of anyone dying during the construction. I have often heard that Grand Commander John Henry Coles passed away here in the building.
That's correct. Yes.
Now, was it in his office, in his bedroom, or do we know?
I don't know. I think it was either in his bedroom or in that suite in the area that now occupies the accounting department. As you know, that was one time the personal suite of the Grand Commander, who had full roam of the building during the evening, which I always thought would be kind of cool. So we know that he passed there, and we also know that Grand Commander Kleinkinecht's father also passed inside of the building.
Oh wow, I didn't realize
I believe
that.
so. I believe that's the story.
And he had
that
been the Grand Secretary
for a number of years. Grand Secretary General for many years also.
So there's two prominent brothers that passed away within the walls of the house.
Within the building.
Yes.
But of course, we have another case of a person dying on the outside of the building.
It fell into the moat, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct.
So leaped over. The story I have heard, and you can confirm or dispel, was someone was running, fleeing from police or something to that effect, leapt over one of the very large sphinxes out front. It looks like those aren't that far off of the ground, but in fact, on the other side is about a 30-foot drop.
That's right. Yeah, if you see it from the one side, it looks like you'd be able to leap over a small wall of perhaps 3 feet. So you'd land on a lawn and you could hide from whoever was chasing you. But in fact, it is about a 30-foot drop onto solid concrete. And apparently that person broke their neck, and they were discovered by employees the next day.
My goodness. I have seen parents letting small children kind of climb on. They don't look over to that side, and they let children climb on the scale side where the sphinxes are. And I've said to more than one parent, hey, you might want to have the kid get down, because on the other side there's a 30-foot drop, and the color from the parent's face drains, and they run and grab their kid. It's very deceptive.
It is.
There's two prominent Masons that passed in the building, a person we don't know on the outside. So a few deaths here in these walls. And I know that there are many employees who have stories, and I've talked to a few. One thing I do want to ask you, because I've been doing some research on this, and we found, and it's on our YouTube channel, the recording of the funeral of John Henry Coles, who is interred here in the building, not too far from Grand Commander Pike. He passed in 1954, but he ceased being Grand Commander a few years before that. So he continued to live here even after he was Grand Commander?
That's what I understand, is that he lived here, I think it was 2 years after he gave up his office. But yes, this was his permanent residence. He was here for so many years. This was literally his home. Was he the only Grand Commander to have lived here full time? Yes. Pike lived in the old house at the temple. The former
but he never even set foot in it. This building was 20 years after his death.
Correct. So I guess you could say it was a tradition. Pike had served as many years as he had and was the permanent resident of the house of the temple. And that's where John Henry Coles first met Pike. When he was a very young Scottish Rite Mason, 32nd degree, they made a visit to the house of temple, and he met Pike, and he describes this actually of Pike being in a room that was filled with bird cages and singing birds. And
there are pictures of that the Library of Congress has that we've shared in various places. So
that's right.
It's pretty cool to see.
And then in a sense, you can visualize that passing of the torch, and Coles also being a bachelor, living here in the house of the temple and then passing.
So I just thought, I didn't realize, for some reason, I really thought he went out with his boots on, and then I was doing some further research and realized that the dates didn't quite, that he stayed past his term of office a couple of years. If I believe
that's correct.
So let's get down to some of the things that you have experienced. You often come in at dark 30, and I know why. Because you're Art de Hoyos, and walking in here, and I don't get it to the level that you get, but the minute you're in the building, 50 people want to talk to you about 50 different things, so it's hard to get too much done. So you come in literally what is the middle of the night for many people and start your work day. It's still dark, it's always quiet, and you're often the only person here. What things have you encountered, or what tales have you been told that you could share? We'll change the names to protect the innocent.
Okay, I'll tell you the truth. Although, I consider myself to be a rational person, but there are a couple of strange things that have happened.
But even rational people have to acknowledge there are things in this world we cannot explain.
That's right. There are things that go bump in the night.
Indeed.
I was here once early in the morning. I knew I was the only person in the building. I just disarmed the building, opened it up. walked down the long hallway to my office, and there was a closet space directly across from my office door. It actually is a small room that has an interior and an exterior door. I had been in that room the evening before and knew that I left the inside door open because I had plans to go back the next morning and continue to work on the papers that I had inside of that room. In any case, so I went to my office door, I stuck the key in it, I turned it, and as I began to open my door, I heard the interior closet door shut quite loudly. There's no mistaking, the sound of a shutting door, especially
these
when
are
it's
very large wooden doors.
Very large wooden doors. And it was only, maybe 5 feet away from me. So it wasn't mistaking it for something else. It was that door pretty much slamming. So I turned around quickly and stuck my key into the closet door and opened it up, and the interior door was shut. So I said, I know that I had left it open. People might surmise that was some kind of a draft or something, but as you know, there's an eighth of an inch of space between those doors and the floor.
Yeah. And
these doors are very heavy, solid, walnut doors. It was not going to shut by itself. I don't know how to account for this. All I know is that I remember leaving the door open, hearing it slam, opening the door, and that door was shut.
I can personally attest to the fact that I have never seen a door in this building close on its own. If you leave a door even partially ajar, it stays that way until someone moves it. They're heavy, they're big, and they're designed to be so perfectly balanced that they don't move.
I can tell you a couple other things. Is that an employee told me, who no longer works here, so I won't say this person's name.
Okay.
But she told me that she had a stack of books in her hands and was approaching the stairs between the first floor and the basement floor, the large black stairs, and that the door was shut. As you know, there are two big doors there. Yeah, she had a handful of books, and as she approached it, she swears that the door opened enough for her that she could put her foot in between it and push it the rest of the way. And she simply said, thank you, and continued down the stairs. Now, at the bottom of that stairwell, there used to be a portrait of John Henry Coles.
I know right what you're talking about.
And
that stairwell was in a movie, wasn't it?
That's right.
Matt Damon movie.
It was in the movie State of Play.
Okay.
Ben Affleck.
Same thing.
And Russell Crowe. Right. They held a conversation in that stairwell.
Right.
That's right. And an employee told me that he was in the building early one morning and brought his dogs with him. And that as they walked past that stairwell in the basement part, the dog started to make whimpering noises. And he just took a peek around there, and he said he could have sworn that for a second he saw an older, kind of frumpy, rounded, balding gentleman sitting on the stairwell. And then when he, shook himself and looked again, that person was gone. But that when I said, describe me, he said, well, he looked just like the guy in the painting, John Coles.
Sure.
So who used to live here. So, about the idea, of course, about residual hauntings.
Sure, yeah. And if we take all of the, let's air quotes here, ghost evidence that has been gathered over the world in these thousands of years, if anyone, and kind of, filter that down, if anyone is, their spirit remains in this building,
yep,
it's got to be John Henry Coles.
You would think. So whether it was an impression, that was played out again,
sure,
these so-called residual hauntings, who knows? Another time I was with an employee in, I believe it was the Borough Lives room, and we were going to move something that was in one of the locked cases in the corner. And these locked cases used to be where the windows are in the back.
Right. Just to level set for folks listening, Burl Ives, if you don't know, it may predate a lot of folks listening, an American entertainer, radio, movies, television recording artist. And famously, Burl Ives was the voice of the snowman in the Rankin Bass Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So that's a pop culture reference that survives to this day. Most people are familiar with that.
Very famous folk singer.
Yeah, very famous folk singer. And for many years, we housed a lot of his personal effects here, some of his guitars, a lot of his albums, one of the snowmen from the movie. So So that is why Burl Ives had a room here at the House of the
That's
Temple.
right. Very
so
popular.
This room is where this is happening.
Yeah, very popular Freemason, very friendly person. So I was with this employee. We were going to remove something from one of the cases. And we walked toward the case, turned on the lights, walked toward the case. And I simply reached up my hand and I touched the glass on the case. Didn't turn the handle, didn't open it up, anything like this. And these are very, very sturdy. And the second that I touched it, the lights went off in the room and we heard a loud crash. And I thought for sure that something had fallen out of the shelf somehow and broken. And another employee was walking by and heard the crash and threw the door open and flipped the lights up and down again, turned the lights on in the room. And we were bewildered by the fact that we couldn't find what had fallen and crashed because there was nothing that was broken, although we heard that sound inside of the case. So when the lights came on, everything was okay.
I guess Burl cleaned up his mess.
He must have cleaned up his mess. And as I've mentioned to you before, we have one more Burl Ives incident.
Okay, this is a biggie. This is one that'll make even a hardened skeptic say, "Well, that's strange."
And I will furnish this to you so that you can.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has never been shared publicly.
It has not been shared publicly. Another employee and I, he no longer works for us. But we had interest in strange things.
Sure.
We had talked about
It's part of being a Freemason.
things like this. And he got the idea that he was going to put a digital recorder in one of the rooms. And I don't remember if it was in the Burl Ives room itself or the room next to the Burl Ives room. There are various museum spaces, galleries there, where people have experienced things. And so he put it in overnight. And we looked at the, after plugging it into the computer, you could see if there was a sine wave to see if there was any, if it had picked up anything. And then you would select that part and play it because there's, 8 hours of tape or video of audio that you would have to listen to.
Yeah, and nobody can do that.
Yeah. So maybe ghost hunters can do it, but we didn't have that patience.
Yeah, right.
So we looked for the spike, we played it. And as I played it for you, this was in 2007, you hear a series of bangs, and then
in an empty building.
In an empty building at about 2 a.m. And there's nothing mechanical in the room, but you hear this banging, and then you hear a human voice that to me sounds just like Burl Ives. He had a very distinct and well-known voice say, old memories, and then you hear this banging again. And I have played this for several people without telling them whose voice I thought it was. I named various, actors or singers. And I would throw in his name among those, and everybody who knew Burl Ives would identify it as being the voice of Burl Ives, as you did.
I did. The minute I heard it, and you played the clip on your phone, the minute I heard it, I thought, wow, that absolutely is Burl Ives. And I've certainly not seen or heard every single thing that Burl Ives has ever done on recorded media, but it certainly just sounds like he's just reflecting or something.
It does.
Perhaps his spirit was attached to some of the things in the room.
For me, it's one of the strongest examples of an EVP, being able to identify it with a particular person because the voice is so clear that to those who know his voice, you just say, wow, that's him.
In ghost hunter parlance, EVP is electronic voice phenomena. And it's funny you mentioned that, how you guys did that, because what we're going to do here at the House of the Temple, Grand Commander Coles, like many of us, is fascinated by this building, its history, and the strange things that happen in and around it. And so he gave us permission to set up cameras in some of the, let's call them active areas of the building overnight. And we're on Halloween Eve, when allegedly the veil between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. We're going to have several cameras here, and we're going to let them run all night, and people will be able to tune in and watch. So if they want to take part in a ghost watch, they can take part in it. And I'll come on early on, and after we're done trick-or-treating, and host a little bit and maybe talk a little bit about it. So the areas that we're focusing on right now, and you can pass your advice along, are just outside of the crypts where Grand Commanders Pike and Coles are interred. Just outside of in the passageway in the Grand Commander, between the Grand Commander's office and that suite where John Henry Coles lived. So in that area, because we hear a lot of people hear footsteps, they smell tobacco smoke and those kinds of things. So that is a big report. Probably the atrium, the reading room of the main library, and then and now certainly the Pike Room. Is there someplace we missed? Because we'll be able to switch cameras.
I think those are pretty much it. I have heard other stories of people seeing things in the basement by our kitchen area. We had a former employee who said that when he was younger, here working with his father, that they saw some mist light.
That narrows it
yes,
down.
It does.
The two dogs narrows it down as well.
Yes,
when you were talking
that's
earlier.
right. But they said they saw some type of a mist-like substance moving through the air. And, I'm sure there are other people that had experienced this. I'd completely forgotten when you mentioned the tobacco. I experienced that also in the Coles area. I think before I knew that he had actually lived there. There's a men's bathroom right there.
Right.
And I remember coming out of the restroom in one morning, and it smelled like somebody had been smoking, but there was nobody there. And obviously, nobody would smoke in the building.
And specifically, people say it's either cigar or pipe
Yeah,
tobacco.
it was.
It's not a cigarette.
It smelled like pipe tobacco to me.
And he was famously a pipe smoker.
Yes, he was.
It's such an interesting thing. Again, Art is a historian, and which is almost, if not considerably, a scientist in a manner of speaking. And I'm pseudo-journalist again. For many years, that was my job. There are things that we simply cannot explain. And I did get a couple of, when we announced yesterday that we were going to do this sort of ghost watch, we got a few people who sent me emails saying it was not Masonic or not proper to do this kind of thing. And I think that's incorrect. In my opinion, I think it is something we should check into, investigate, see what's going bump in the night. But does Freemasonry, I'm using the broad term, I know we're not Hydra where we're all, some big monolith, but does Freemasonry have an opinion on ghosts, hauntings, or specters?
I don't think so.
Or is that something under the veil of religion? Or an individual's faith and belief, I guess.
I don't know that it's a matter of faith and belief. Some people would make it so. I'm curious in the natural world. And so, I like to look at things wherever there might be evidence. And, people can poo-poo or joke about things like that. But and to be honest, I used to be quite that way myself. Until you experience something yourself, and then you begin to wonder. Things like this Burl Ives EVP are very difficult to explain.
Sure. Since
there was nothing in the room that could either make those noises or imitate a human voice at 2 a.m. And of all the voices to do, you have to be Rich Little, I guess,
sure,
to decide that you want to do Burl Ives. But no, I don't know that I would say it's Masonic or not Masonic. I think it's an issue of human interest. And, Masonic lodges, like any other building where there's a lot of activity, if such things are capable of storing energy or stirring it up, I guess we're as good a candidate as anybody is.
Sure. And especially with the age of buildings and the amount of fascination people have with these types of things.
I'm sure that you're aware also, if you've looked into these things, that there's the idea that particular types of stone over moving bodies of water, and we happen to be that exact
over top of a swamp.
We're on top of a swamp. We're in a stone building. We don't know if there's a piezoelectric effect going on here, but there's all these ideas that people have generated about what could cause these effects, whether they're simply psychological or they're real. If they're psychological, I don't know how you can record it. So it seems to be that there's something going on.
Indeed. I do want to ask you, I guess this is strictly an opinion. I know several employees in this building, some of which, and I won't out any of them, who are, people who you would consider to be very, I don't want to say brave, I guess brave, people you would consider to not be afraid of very many things in this world.
Right. That
get an uncomfortable feeling being in this building by themselves and go out of their way to make sure that they're not here by themselves, especially after dark. They get it. And a quote from one of those brothers was, "I just get a bad feeling." I've never had even so much as a bad feeling at all being in here at dark by myself. I've come in the same hours as you sometimes, and corridors are empty, and the mind plays tricks on you, but I've never had a feeling of something negative being in here.
I've never had a sense of dread or anything negative. I've had the impression, as I mentioned to you before, of experiencing the sense of being stared at.
Yeah.
I was in my office once when I had a different location in the basement, and I was at my computer facing it. I had the feeling that somebody was standing there looking at me. And of course, we all get that. Maybe it's just a natural defense mechanism that we have to, keep ourselves guarded. I turned around, there was nobody there. Turned back, was working on my computer. Still had the feeling. Turned back, there's nobody there. I turned back to look at my computer, and maybe it was a trick of the imagination, but I felt as if somebody flicked my hair a couple of times when I turned back that second time.
There are spaces in this building where you do get an odd, it's not an unpleasant feeling. It's just there's something
not
else.
At all.
It's something here.
It's, it's almost playful, honestly. Like, expect maybe somebody to do to you if they were just teasing you or trying to get your attention. But certainly I've never had any kind of feeling of dread or anything like that.
Brother Arturo de Hoyos, our Grand Archivist, discussing a few of the haunted happenings at the House of the Temple. And I know you're probably screaming at me, play the EVP, play the EVP. We're definitely going to play the EVP. This is the recording Art sent to me after our interview there of the EVP that was gathered roughly 2007 inside the old Burl Ives room, which is now home to our Grand Archivist's collection. So take a listen and judge for yourself. I'll play it right now. Let me play that for you one more time, and you can hear very clearly old memories. It's a man's voice. Does sound quite a lot like Burl Ives. And there's all that banging and stuff. This was 2 o'clock in the morning, the building completely empty. Let's play it one more time. That's Brother Art de Hoyos, EVP, or electronic voice phenomenon. And the way that ghost hunters do this is they get a recording device, they ask a question to the ethos, and then they play the device back, and they hear an answer in that recording. I'm actually going to do a little bit of a deep dive on this particular EVP, give a full explanation, and actually use some digital audio tricks to clean it up even a little bit more. And I'm going to do that on our YouTube channel. So when you're done listening to the podcast, check the link below and you will get a link to our YouTube page so that you can listen to this EVP a few more times and see what happens and how it sounds when we clean it up. You will not believe the results. So make sure when you're done listening to the podcast, you'll check out the YouTube channel. Up next, we're going to talk to a person who frequently visits the House of the Temple. Now, she's not a staff member, not yet anyway. It's my daughter, Willa. Having a dad that works at the House of the Temple means that you spend a lot of time at the House of the Temple. Summertimes, you go to work with Dad, and sometimes on Saturdays you go to work. You've done tours, you've put together treasure hunts. I'm here with my daughter Willa, who is just about to turn 14, and I've talked to a lot of the staff about different experiences that they've had at the House of the Temple, spooky experiences. Now, you haven't had any particular experience, but there's a room in the House of the Temple that creeps you out. Which room is it?
The Albert Pike room. So
this is the room in the House of the Temple. It's in the mid-level of the temple, and it's a room about 20 by 20, maybe a little larger than that. And in it are a lot of the personal effects of past Grand Commander Albert Pike. And it's got, his personal effects as in shoes, his Masonic regalia, some of it anyway, some of his personal diaries and things of that nature. And then there's one particular item that is probably the creepiest piece in the House of the Temple collection, and we've talked about it before, which is
the death mask.
All right, for people who've not seen the death mask, Willa, what is the Albert Pike death mask?
The death mask is I want to say it's plaster cast of his face after he died, and it's his eyeballs, his nose, his forehead, all of it, and that freaks me out.
Now, do you know that there are pieces of actual Albert Pike stuck to it?
No.
Yeah, if you look closely at Grand Commander Pike's death mask, if you look closely at his death mask, you will notice that his eyelashes and eyebrows and parts of his beard are stuck to the plaster.
Ew.
Yeah. So why does that room creep you out, just in general?
It's just, the room is just drafty and really cold, which is odd for the House of the Temple because the House of the Temple is typically very warm. And just, like, a lot of, like, the old stuff in there, like the death mask, the half-burnt candles, the hairbrush, all of it just creeps me out.
Those candles came from Grand Commander Pike's funeral.
Lovely.
And from his original funeral when he was buried at Oak Hill Cemetery, they also, the hairbrush actually has pieces of his hair still in it.
I assumed that.
So you just scratch that off of your tour list whenever you visit?
Pretty much, yeah. I won't go in there without you or someone else. I really don't like it in there. It's just so unnaturally cold for the temple because it's an old stone building. It's very warm, and that one room alone is just cold and drafty, and it's just hard to be in by yourself.
So no ghost experiences, but definitely get creeped out by that room.
Yes.
Another lady who spends quite a lot of time at the House of the Temple is Miss Elizabeth Sizemore. In fact, she grew up at the House of the Temple. She's been going there since she was a little girl, and now she works there as the Grand Commander's executive assistant. And I got a chance to sit down with Elizabeth, who does not love when I put microphones or cameras in front of her, but she was kind enough to talk to me about some of the things that she has experienced over her many years in the building. When I spoke with my daughter a few minutes ago, I said, you know, when your dad works in the House of the Temple, you end up hanging out at the House of the Temple with some frequency. And this is a lady who I just heard from our Grand Commander may have had some diapers changed here in the building. And her granddad and her dad work here in the building. Wonderful, wonderful brothers. And this is, of course, Elizabeth Sizemore, who is the executive assistant to our Grand Commander. And she hates being on the podcast, so she's giving me the evil eye right now.
No, that's fine.
Talking House of the Temple ghost stories, you've been here a time or two.
Yes.
And you've had a few experiences.
Yes.
Willa, we just heard from her. She hates going in the Pike room. When she walks in there, she says it's cold, it creeps her out.
Creepy, yes.
You work in the office that used to be occupied by John Henry Coles. And I just had a chat with Art, and he said if anybody's haunting this building, essentially, it's him.
I agree.
What says you, who works in his old office?
I completely agree with that. So our suite takes up the whole length of the building, and on one end is Mr. Coles and the Grand Commander's office, and then at the other end of the building is where his bedroom was and is now the accounting office, and we have connecting doors all through that side of the building. I've heard many stories of the accounting office. You can smell pipe tobacco in there a lot. I've heard that from my grandfather. I've heard that from people who've worked in that office. Me in particular, I had an experience the first year that I worked here. It was the first day that I was working in the office by myself, so I was really nervous, but I made it through the whole day. It was about 4:15 in the afternoon, and I heard Mr. Seals. This was when Mr. Seal was our Grand Commander, so his chair is different than the one we have now, and it used to make this popping, squeaky noise when he would get out of it. So you always knew when he was getting out or into his chair because it made this weird pop. But I was alone, and I heard the pop, and I thought, well, who's in the office? Who went in there without me knowing? And so I got up and looked around the corner, and his chair was spinning. It spun all the way around 360 degrees and then stopped to face the window behind his desk. And I got goosebumps, I got chills. And so I packed up my stuff and I left early.
So is that your biggest one? That's
my most significant story that's happened to me. I've had a few things happen to me downstairs. A few years ago at session, I was the only one in the building, and I heard somebody behind me say, "What are you doing?" as I was walking up the staircase. And I went to the security officer and said, "Is anybody else in the building?" And he said, "No, we opened it for you. Don't you remember?" Because I came to get materials for session. And I was the only one in the building. And there was somebody standing behind me said something to me.
Now, I don't mean this to sound insulting, but You can be a little skittish from time to time. So often when we're here for late night meetings, myself, Daniel, your office mate, the Grand Commander, we'll get in the elevator, leave, and we'll jump up and down the elevator just to terrify you.
Yeah.
Do you get a creepy feeling here? Or do you feel safe here? I mean, you've grown up here, so this is...
Yeah, I feel very safe here. The only time that I've ever felt, I would say, creeped out is like when I heard that voice or I saw the chair move, and I wouldn't say that I was scared, no. And someone who used to work here a while ago used to say, well, they can't be that bad because they must all be Masons, right?
That's what Art and I were saying. Like, there's nothing malevolent in this place at all.
No, and I would say, especially if we lose things in the office, we'll blame it on Mr.
John
Howells.
Henry.
Yeah. But no, I don't think or any of them are being, malicious or anything like that. I feel very safe here, and
you don't feel safe anywhere. You're like, you're like Scooby and Shaggy rolled into one.
A little bit, yeah. I'm scared of the dark still.
Well, I appreciate you talking with us. Happy Halloween. And you've heard that we're doing this Halloween broadcast because we told you yesterday we're setting cameras up outside of your office, essentially, because that hallway is one of the places where people most often report encountering things.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll catch anything?
I hope so. I want to catch something.
Have you heard Art's EVP?
I have, yes. And he showed that to me. Actually, I told him the story of me finding the chair turning, and he immediately pulled open his EVP to show me, and we talk about it all the time. We love that.
You yelled zoinks and ran from the room.
Oh, yeah. So that gives me goosebumps just hearing it. It really, that old Burl Ives Museum room, I've had my phone die in there. I've had our radios not work in there. It's creepy.
Sharing her ghost stories, that's Miss Elizabeth Sizemore. She's the executive assistant to Grand Commander Jim Cole. And I guess it bears mentioning, of course, that she's the daughter of our Grand Executive Director, Admiral Bill Sizemore, and granddaughter of past Grand Executive Director, Admiral Gene Sizemore. Both of those brothers are illustrious members of the Grand Cross Court of Honor. Now, the House of the Temple is far from the only Masonic building with reports of ghosts. Joining us now via Zoom are two brothers from Texas who are paranormal investigators and actually have investigated their lodge and now help host ghost tours of their lodge, Nat M. Washer Lodge, number 1270 in San Antonio, Texas. Brother Jason West, 32nd degree, KCCH, past master of Kelly Lodge, number 1171, and Hondo City Lodge, number 756. He's also Tyler at Nat M. Washer Lodge, and a brother of mine from the Invisible Lodge. Also joining us is Brother Josh Finley, 32nd degree. He's the Senior Warden of Victory Lodge, number 1160, and Junior Warden of Perfect Union Lodge, number 10 in Texas. Jason, let's start with you and tell us how you got started with ghost hunting or ghost tours at Nat M. Washer Lodge.
Previously, myself and Brother Finn, we did an investigation at Nat M. Washer Lodge, number 1270 in San Antonio, which is a Victorian mansion built in 1890, and which belonged to a brother, actually, that we found out by doing research. That was the city physician. Well, the lodge actually purchased the building in 1950. So we did an investigation there. When was that, Finn? A couple of years ago. Now it's opened up, and we conduct ghost tours there, where people come in, actually get for fundraisers, and they actually get to go on tours of the lodge. And we've had other paranormal investigation groups come in as well and do tours there.
What led you to want to do this as a paranormal investigation? Was it just that the building is old and kind of has that feel to it, or have people had experiences over the history of the building?
Yes, there have been quite a few experiences. I would say over the last 60 years or so, and so they ever since it's been a lodge. I've heard stories as well, and even when that's actually one thing that brought me to it was just the building itself. And I visited the lodge, and I just fell in love with the lodge itself, and just great guys there. There were a lot of stories there, and I've had personal experiences as well. Just going in, doing filming, Lone Star Freemason YouTube channel, just where I go and film lodges. And as I was filming the lodge room by myself, I was standing by the door, and the doorknob turned, and I looked down while I'm filming, and the door just pops open. And I looked really quick, and no one was there. Everybody was downstairs. That was my first experience there.
Your first of many, or first of a few, or
First of many. Actually, the night I joined the lodge, they voted on me, and I became an endowed member there. I'm sitting in the north, and
a place of darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sitting there, and amazingly that it did happen in the north, and everybody else sitting in the south. They were looking. So when I was voted on, everybody went to congratulate me. There's a past master photo. There's past master photos around the lodge room, and one of those photos, and everybody else said on the other side that it didn't just fall off, that it flew off of the wall and landed behind me. And there have been other brothers when they joined the lodge. It was like a celebratory something happens.
Any stories to share of interesting experiences at the lodge?
I should preface my experience with the fact that we've got a lot of very close friends and brothers at that lodge. Always said it's one of my favorite to visit. So naturally, I've heard some stories, and these are good guys that are telling me these stories. They don't always have a conclusion, if that makes sense. They kind of leave it up to you. But after hearing this for a while, I don't remember how it came up in conversation, but I was talking to Brother West. And at some point I said, hey, wouldn't it be cool to maybe spend the night or stay late or be here by ourselves and just kind of look around, film it, see if anything happens, right? So we shot the full feature of the strange happenings at Nat Washer 1 year ago. So if you go onto my YouTube channel, my This Is Finn channel, it's on my Facebook page as well. You can watch the full feature. And yeah, coincidentally, a couple of, let's say, interesting things happened. Mostly sounds, things we tried to capture with our equipment. And it's just a very strange feeling at that lodge. It's not ominous. I want to say, like, it's not a bad feeling, but there's a ridiculous amount of history and love of that building. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
So when you say equipment now, for folks who don't follow ghost hunting TV shows like I do, and I know a lot of other folks do, but what kind of equipment are you guys using when you're doing your investigation, aside from cameras and things of that nature?
I don't think I took a Nikon camera with a very specific mic, and I was pretty much armed with that. Between that and my phone, I don't recall. Did you bring something with you, Brother West?
I had a camera and video camera, and I also have my my audio recorder. So I do voice recordings for the EVPs, for the electronic voice phenomenon.
Now, again, for folks who don't know what that is, explain what EVP, what electronic voice phenomenon is.
Yes, that's there are times when people believe that there are some paranormal investigators that believe that they can turn on the recording and that you can speak and ask questions, and that some things you may not be able to hear to the ear, but it may pick up some type of noise or some type of some people that, obviously that we've seen have picked up voices or what something sounds like to be a voice. I also know as well that they had done, they've used some other types of equipment.
I would add that in today's age, there's probably a lot of very decent apps you can get with your phone.
You mentioned ghost tours of the building. Are there stories that you share at that point in time, or are you just kind of letting people tour the building, or how exactly is that? Are you guys doing those? Because a lot of times when you go on these ghost walks, there are stories that sort of go along with it. So does the building have a story that goes along with it?
Brother Oscar Reyes, again, going back to the full feature, gives a pretty intense testimonial. I would even say that Brother Oscar is the historian of that lodge. That might be going out on a limb. Kind of towards the end of our video, he goes into great detail. There's lots of different stories by members throughout the years. What's kind of interesting is a lot of them are repeat, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It gets passed down, and at the time, maybe that's just the way that lodge was operating, but there's not a lot of discussion. There are members that you can ask and they'll say, shoot, I haven't heard any of the ghost stories. Like, here we are in King William's district and this old mansion, surely something's going on, if you believe in that kind of thing. But I couldn't tell you type thing. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
From my experience, a lot of members have had experiences, and it's just it's not like Finn said, it's not ominous. It's something that everybody, it's like home, when you go there, and it's almost like that maybe some of these are brothers that have that because of the experiences that, how when we go to lodge and you really love a lodge and you love your brothers there, and it's just a great place to be. And that it's like that energy from that fellowship and of just, Masonry being there. And I agree. There's nothing ominous there, but I think that just about everybody that I know in that lodge has had some type of experience, and it's not just one person being there, and it just happens to the one person like it did for me the first time. But I've had quite a few experiences with the lodge full and brothers there in the room, and everybody just kind of acknowledges it and respects it, and so it's a fun place to be, though.
Masons, especially, Scottish Rite, and I think even York Rite Masons, there's strong teachings against the ideas of superstition. The Scottish Rite addresses it very specifically. I'm wondering, do any brothers ever give you guys a hard time for doing this or for hosting this kind of thing, or do they kind of just look at it as sort of all in good fun?
I think the way that we do things, and this is something that we've agreed to. And I've even at the Valley of San Antonio, I've actually received permission as well from illustrious Bradley Kohanke to actually conduct an investigation in our cathedral there as well. And we always do everything with respect to the fraternity and with respect to the brethren. And definitely it's mainly to highlight the history and highlight the fraternity, and to, it is a lot of it's in fun, but also we're using it also to bring attention, not negative attention, but to, highlight the fraternity and highlight our history and our buildings. So that's a lot of what we do. So we're not really getting any, at least I haven't gotten any pushback on it.
We also worked very hard to kind of let everybody know this is not a Masonic connection, if that makes sense. So we are Masons and we're in a Masonic Lodge, but we plan to go to several locations that have nothing to do with Masonry. These are just places that we're familiar with and brothers we know really well. And like Brother West said, we took the time to get the correct permissions, make sure it was done very respectful. For the most part, everybody was on board.
Brothers Jason West and Josh Finley talking some spooky stories from Nat M. Washer Lodge in Texas. There are links to their YouTube channels and also a link to the Nat M. Washer Lodge page in the podcast description, so make sure you check those out. Before we wrap the show today, I got to tell you about this very fun thing we're going to do, Halloween night 2022. We are hosting a live House of the Temple Ghost Watch on YouTube beginning at 8:33 p.m. Halloween night. We've set up a bunch of remote cameras in some of the areas of the House of the Temple that have the most reports of strange activity. And we're going to try and see what we can capture in those nighttime hours when no one is inside the temple. And don't forget to check out our Burl Ives EVP YouTube video. So go to our YouTube channel and I do a full breakdown and sort of a digital restoration of that EVP that you heard Brother Arturo de Hoyos talking about just a little bit ago right here on the podcast. The link for that YouTube video is in the podcast description, so you can click on it or just go to YouTube on your app or wherever you watch YouTube and search Scottish Rite Freemasons. It should come right up for you. Have a safe and happy Halloween. Drop me a line sometime. podcast@scottishrite.org is the email address. I'm Maynard Edwards, 32nd degree KCCH, and I will catch you next time right here on the Tyler's Place.